Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Core Studio. Welcome to the show. So, another set in the books, or should I say another spoiler season in the books, and after all the commanders are spoiled, I like to take a look at all of them and say, you know what? Which ones am I ready to build around, and which ones am I excited about, which ones am I not as excited about, and which ones will I never build around? So on this episode, I'm going to share with you my perspective on what commanders I'm going to be building, and which ones, well, yeah, I'm not going to be building. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. It's a great discussion, you know, on what people's preferences are when it comes to what commanders they want to build around and what they like. And I just absolutely love having the discussion with all of you, and where you can tell me where you think I'm completely off base, or where you think I'm completely right on certain things, or completely wrong on certain things. So yeah, let me know in the comments below your thoughts. Again, this is all based off my opinions. I will share those in my perspective on why I will or will not build around Coma World Eater. An 8/12 Serpent for 7 mana in Simic. The spell can't be countered. Trample Ward 4. When it deals combat damage to a player, create 4 3/3 blue Serpent creature tokens named Coma's Coil. Now, this is one that I feel like when I first started playing Commander, I probably would have been pretty drawn to this. This is kind of like Voltron with a twist in a way, where it's like, okay, Voltron, but also goes wide. It can be really hard to deal with. Again, it's, hey, can't be countered, Trample Ward 4. So that's like, yeah, you're probably not going to touch this commander, basically, ever with that Ward 4, and you're not going to be able to counter it. And if I hit, I'm getting a ton of value off this. And of course, there's some spicy ways you can get value off of it. Yeah, I mean, give this double strike. It's going to be taking opponents out quite quickly, and also making an absurd army. Have things like Garrick's Pack Leader in play where you can draw a bunch of cards when that happens. So there are some more interesting pieces to it. I don't think it's interesting enough for me. Like, I just don't think it's quite there. And yeah, I think it's probably more of like a likely won't build. Like, the build around it path is pretty straightforward for the most part, I feel like. Okay, yeah, hit hard, like probably get an extra, 3 power at least, so you can get a 2-shot KO. Have double strike so you can get a 1-shot KO with that extra 3 power. And also utilize that double strike to get more of those tokens. Maybe have some anthem effects for those tokens as well. And also have some like card draw based on those things coming to play, or other things happening based on those things coming to play. I think it's just a bit straightforward, so I do think that I probably, I'm probably just going to put on likely won't build. I do think it's going to be one of the more popular ones from the set, though, probably. Maybe not, though, without high mana value, but yeah, the old Coma, very popular and very salty. This one I would think would be less salty. Anyways, moving on. Poljamar Illusionist. This is a 4/5 Human Illusion Wizard with flying that costs 6 mana in blue. When it enters, choose a creature type, draw a card for each creature you control of that type. So this one is, because it's pretty wide, like if this actually specified like draw a card for each wizard you control, I would be less likely to build around it because it'd be kind of more on rails in my opinion. This one's like, you could go in a couple different directions. You can obviously choose, it's kind of like Morophon in blue in that way-ish, where it's like, yeah, just pick whatever creature type you want and you can go wide in that. Like, you can go wizards, you can go humans, you can go merfolk, you can go a lot of different kinds of things. And yeah, you can go like specific into one, or you could go like, all right, I'm just going to get a bunch of different ways to make a bunch of different kinds of tokens out there. Like there's like, what's the squid one? When it pops, it makes a bunch of, tentacles or whatever it is. Anyways, yeah, like you could go like a bunch of different like token producers that produce different things, and then just whatever made a bunch of things on the board, then just get this into play, blink it a couple times, get a lot of draw off of it. So it is interesting. Yeah, because it's a bit more broad, I do think, and I apologize, I'm going in reverse order from mana value, so that's what I'm doing on this episode, just trying to change it up a little bit. So there you go. I'm going to go with a might build for this one. Like, I do think it has potential because it is interesting. Next up, though, Niv-Mizzet Visionary. Now, this is one that, I mean, it's definitely going to be up there in the popular commanders of the set. Maybe we'll do an episode at some point when we get a little closer to release date. I do think that this one's going to be quite popular. It's not for me, though. Like, it is... okay. And I don't mean to offend anyone when I'm saying certain things on this episode, because, like, this is just my perspective and how I like to build decks. Like, one of the things that I say typically when it comes to, like, tribal decks, like, I don't like building tribal decks myself personally for the most part, because those are more on rails, really. For, like, most of the cards that are good for that tribe, like, you pretty much use them in every single one. This one is just a bit overpowered. Niv Mizzet Visionary, a 5/5 Dragon Wizard flying for 6 mana, and is it? You have maximum hand size. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, you draw that many cards. This one isn't necessarily on rails, I wouldn't say. Like, it's not like, oh yeah, you just grab all these cards, throw them in the deck, and it's good. Like, this is one where it's kind of, it's more along the lines of like, yeah, you can just grab a miscellaneous chunk of cards, though, that like are non-combat damage sources, like repeat non-combat damage sources like a Sulfuric Vortex, etc, etc, etc. Sure, you can utilize some burn spells like, was it Bolt Wave, whatever that one we just got is, which is a 1 mana way to deal 3 damage each opponent. So it's like, oh yeah, cool, draw 9 for 1 mana. It's just a bit too easy, I would say. So because it's a bit too easy, I'm going to throw this in the will never build. Like, I think, again, there are certain commanders that are a bit too easy, but like I feel like you can go like an interesting direction with them. This is like a bit too easy, and you go in that direction. You definitely go in that direction. Like, you should go in that direction. You should just get all the different, non-combat damage source repeats in play that just punish opponents throughout the game. Maybe even punish yourself a little bit too. That doesn't really matter all that much. It's like group slug with mass card draw, and you're going to have an obnoxious hand size, and like it's going to be one of those where, whoops, I just skipped really quick. It's just going to be one of those, I feel like, where when you're playing it, like, and it's an optimal way to play it, like, you're going to have to take a lot of time on your turn and your opponent's turns, like, when, like, they're doing anything, or when you're going to be doing anything, because you're going to have, like, a handful of 40 cards, and you're going to be like, wait a second, I might have a counterspell for that, and you're, like, sorting through everything. So it's just one that I personally, it's definitely one that I feel like I would have gravitated toward back in the day when I first started playing Magic, but not so much right now. It's just a different style for me. Next up, Slinza the Spike Stampede. Okay. Now I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth at this point, because this is a tribal commander, and I did say how typically I am not going to be building around tribal commanders because they are typically on rails a bit. Slinza the Spike Stampede, you're at the very least getting a likely won't build, because like my gut's like, okay, tribal, probably not going to build it, but it's like, you know what, beasts are a bit different. It's a different kind of beast. There you go. A 5/5 beast for 5 mana in green, but it's actually a Gruul commander. Beast spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. Each other beast creature you control enters an additional counter on it. Whenever Slinza or another creature with power 4 or greater enters, you may pay 1 in a Gruul. When you do, Slinza fights our creature you don't control. Okay, actually, really quick, I'm just nervous all the time now about saying, like, Gruul versus Golgari. For whatever reason, like, on 2 episodes in a row a while back, like, I kept just mixing up those 2 words, and I don't know why. It was probably during spoiler season, and a lot of things were going on at that point. Okay, so this is, again, a Gruul commander. Very cool. It is a tribal commander, so it is on rails. Yes, but it also is a tribe that's, like, not well supported. It's a tribe that has a good amount of beasts. Like, it's kind of like humans or like soldiers, that kind of stuff. It's like, it's a tribe that doesn't have like a bunch of like, tribal lords or that kind of stuff. A bunch of like effects that help that tribe specifically itself. It is one that has a good amount of creatures that are beasts, though, and especially ones that are like, oh, I didn't realize that was a beast. I didn't realize that was a beast. That was a beast. That was a beast. Like, there's a lot of different ones that you could use. So, like, there are different avenues you can take it. And again, of course, yes, there are certain tribal components to it that you're like, yeah, I gotta add to that, add that, add that. But again, unlike, let's say dragons or elves, like those just have like, yeah, there's no real reason not to use this one because this is just a very good tribal staple for dragons, because it is a tribal lord effect for dragons, or it's a certain tribal effect for dragons. Beasts don't really have that. There's not too many of those beast effects out there. Essentially, like, yeah, when a beast does this, you do this. Like, there's not a lot of those. So this one I'm going to put likely won't build. Again, I typically don't build tribal decks, except for my Changelings Lords deck. But other than that, it's the closest it'll get to being like on the bubble of a build for me for a tribal deck. Next up, Braulio Sephiroth Band. A Star Centaur Scout for 5 mana in green. Power of toughness each equal to the number of lands you control. Whenever it attacks, draw a card. You may put a land card from your hand on the battlefield. This one is just kind of a blah commander to me. It's like, okay, I mean, yeah, you get lands in play. This gets larger. It hits harder. Cool. You attack with it. You draw cards. You put lands in play. There's not really like a lot of like build direction around this other than get it in play, attack, and get lands in play. That's like basically it. So because like I don't feel like there's a lot of avenues for doing a lot with this, I just think that this is definitely one that I will never build. So yeah, I think it's again, it's not like the worst design ever for an uncommon commander. Like, it's at least like playable. It's just not a very interesting one to me. All right, Zimone, Paradox Sculptor, a 1/4 Heathen Wizard for 4 mana in Simic. Beginning of combat on your turn, put a counter on each of up to 2 target creatures you control. And then Simic colors tap, double the number of each kind of counter of 2 target creatures and artifacts you control. Okay. Here's the thing with counters commanders. My very first commander was Rishkar, and I was very excited about that one. And then I realized that it takes forever sometimes to put all the counters on things. And I also built a, what's it called, Deep Glow Skate deck, essentially, where I just, like, had, what was it, a Prismatic Bridge into Deep Glow Skate, and then just charge counters on everything and all these other kinds of counters, and just doubling it, blinking it, doubling it, blinking it, doubling it, blinking it. It takes a long, long, long time to double up counters on stuff, on a lot of things. So, yeah, it's one that's, like, you can definitely do interesting things with it. There's a lot of cool things you can do with it. There's obviously untap effects that you can use and abuse with this to double, then double, then double again, and get a lot of counters on something and do some really cool things. And again, the fact that it lets you do artifacts as well, I think is huge, and that's great. Like Everflowing Chalice, cool, awesome, yay. I do think that, again, because of the counters on it, it's not a never, but it is one that I'm definitely more hesitant to build because, yeah, it's just that way. Okay, next up. Third, Mare of Destiny, a 2/4 Pegasus for 4 mana in mono white, flying lifelink. Whenever you cast a Pegasus unicorn or horse spell, copy it. Other Pegasi unicorns and horses you control get ++1. This is one that it's just probably not for me. Again, it's a bit more on rails. Like, again, these aren't that supportive. So this is kind of like the opposite of the Beast Commander, in my opinion. Like the Beast Commander, again, like you have, again, a tribe that's unsupported, like this one as well. Like this is just a very unsupported tribe overall, or I mean, group of tribes. But beasts, like you have a ton of beasts to pick from. There are a ton of beasts out there in Gruul. There's only so many Pegasi, unicorns, and horsies. There's only so many in mono white. And like most of them are pretty garbage in my opinion. So it's like, oh, Opaline unicorn, yay, I get 2 of them. And like the effect is really cool, but like I do think the deck again just kind of builds itself, and that's not what I'm looking for typically with a commander deck. So I'm not going to be building this one, I don't think, probably ever, until like we get more and more support from, maybe that's the thing. Like in the future, if we get like, you know, a lot of horses, a lot of unicorns, a lot of Pegasuses, Pegasi, whatever it is, then maybe, but not at this point. All right, Tycho the Patient Avalanche, a 4/5 Turtle Ninja Teenage Mutant for 4 mana in blue, but this one's actually a Dimir commander. Tycho the Patient Avalanche enters tap. Whenever the creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it didn't die, scry 1 and put a counter on Tycho. Whenever it attacks, you may pay a Dimir. When you do, target attacking creature can't be blocked this turn. So, yeah, this one's an interesting commander. It does take things in a different direction. It's like, okay, creatures leave the battlefield, but didn't die. Then I get value. So, obviously, it'd be a lot easier to use and abuse if it's like, yeah, creatures leave the battlefield. All right, I sacrifice a bunch of creatures to Viserys here. Yay, I get a lot of scry and a lot of counters on this. Awesome. That being said, yeah, it's more so like, it does like kind of like make it a little more interesting where it's like, okay, I need to either blink them, exile them, bounce them, whatever it's going to be. I need them to leave so I get value out of it. It does give that interesting component to it. It's just one where it's like, okay, the payoff is like nice for that card selection, but like counters on it, do I really care that much about like, okay, I made this gigantic, now I swing through and pay to make it unblockable, and then I hit you. Like, it's not my typical. There are some cool directions I'm sure you could take it. It's just not coming to mind for me. So I think this is like a likely won't build. Yeah, we're starting off pretty low right now. I'm sure we're gonna get. There's definitely some more exciting commanders for me, at least for me, coming up at some point. All right, Rev, Tithe Extractor, a 3/3 human rogue for 4 mana in black. Whenever you attack, target creature gains Death Touch until end of turn. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal a combination of player, create a treasure token. Look at the top card of the player's library, exile face down. You may cast the card for as long as it remains exiled. This is kind of like Ragavan-ish, but for... It's like Ragavan, but for like multiple creatures. It's multiple creatures, but like 1 per each opponent. So it's like 3 Ragavan, essentially. And that's kind of decent. Like it's interesting. Like the like Death Touch aspect of that is nice because like you could like utilize like first strike creatures and be like, sure, block it, whatever. Haha, yeah, don't do that. But yeah, a bunch of like flying men type strategy, like very low to the ground creatures that are evasive in one way or another, whether that's like Swamp Walker, Menace, or, you know, flying. There's a good amount in black, actually, that are low to the ground and evasive Shadow as well. But yeah, get through on opponents and then utilize their cards. Again, like the proliferation of treasure strategies is not my favorite thing. That being said, limiting it to mono black versus like yeah, Rakdos treasures kind of essentially, or even more than that. I do like that aspect of it. So this does give some interesting angles. I do like the low the ground flying men type strategies. I do find them to be interesting for the most part. So I do think this is a different angle to it. So yeah, I do think that this one's actually, and maybe it's just because I haven't had a lot up toward the top, but like my gut's like, you know what? This is a might build. It is a might build for me where it's like, you know what? I do think that there are some interesting aspects to it. There's some pretty cool things with it. Next up, Koala, a Johnny's Pride Mate, a 3/3 cat warrior for 4 mana in white. Whenever it attacks other 10 creatures you control, get +X/+0 until end of turn. X the number of counters on it. Whenever you gain life, put a counter on it. Pay 4 mana. In total, you gain 1 life. So this is one where it's like, okay, I mean, you can do some pretty spicy things with it where it's like, all right, I would just build this like probably all Soul Sisters effects that I could find, like creatures that have basically whenever the creature comes into play, you gain a life. Now, there's only so many that count your opponent's creatures as well, which is very nice that when they do. But even the ones that just count your creatures coming to play, yeah, that's great. All of a sudden, you cast a Secure the Waste before your turn for like 7 mana or whatever, get like 7 tokens in play, and then your 2 Soul Sister type effects just gain you 14 life. 14 separate instances of life, again, which is huge out of those separate instances of life gain to get those counters on this, like a ton out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, next turn, you swing, and your entire team gets like +14, and you just took out everyone. So this is a pretty interesting commander. It is one that's like, yeah, it's definitely above like a likely won't build. It is definitely one where it's like, yeah, you can do some pretty spicy things with it. It's a might build for me. It's not one that I'm like, oh, I've got to build this right now. But it is up there like on a, oh, there's some interesting aspects to it. You can do some cool things with it as well. So I do think that this one is a might build for me. Next up, Nazar the Velvet Fang, a 3/3 vampire warlock for 4 mana in black. Menace. Whenever you gain life, put a feeding counter on it. Whenever attacks, you remove 3 feeding counters from it. If you do, draw 3 cards, lose 3 life. Yeah, this one just doesn't speak to me. Yeah, this one's gonna be a will never build. Like, it's one that, like, it's not because, like, I have anything against this one. It's just, like, there's not really a lot of interesting things going on with it. It's like, okay, I can, again, the life gain, like, that makes sense. Okay, but, like, I need to send my commander into danger to draw 3 cards and lose 3 life. Like, the payoff isn't, like, a really cool build around. It's like, okay, this is, like, a draw engine for me. But, like, it's like life gain, draw engine, convoluted way to get there. So, like, it doesn't speak to me. Okay. Next up, Kaikar Zephyr Awakener, a 3/4 bird wizard with flying for 4 mana in Azorius. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, choose 1. Exile a creature you control, return that card to the battlefield. Our zone's control to begin next end step. Create a 1/1 white sphere creature along with flying. This is a different iteration of the original Kaikar, obviously, which is like, okay, make a bunch of spirits, but you can also sacrifice them for mana like a ritual effect. This is more like delayed blink effect. This is an interesting commander. There's some pretty interesting things you can do with using and abusing ETBs as well. Obviously, you could just go like all anthems, all non-creature, like all like artifact enchantment anthems as well, and just chuck them in the deck and make a bunch of spirits and that kind of stuff as well. But yeah, using and abusing ETBs can be quite fun with this. Yeah, Diluvian Primordial, quite fun too. This is one where it's like, it's probably like between like the likely won't and the might. But yeah, I'm gonna go with the might. I do like sometimes when you have like the kind of the force, like you have to pick like on the higher end or the lower end. Like there's no middle ground on this. You can't just pick like, oh yeah, maybe might. I don't know. Okay, next up, Fumulus the Infestation. Okay, a 2/2 vampire insect with flying and death touch for 4 mana in black. Whenever a player sacrifices a non-token creature, create a 1/1 black insect creature with flying. Whenever an insect, leech, slug, or worm you control attacks, if any player loses 1 life, you gain 1 life. This, I think, is a commander that some might be sleeping on just on how powerful this is. I'm not going to spoil where I put it, but I kind of am right now. But check out my episode on my tiers rankings for the commanders from these sets. I mean, this set and the Jumpstart. I mean, I kind of consider it the same thing. But yeah, this is one where it's incredibly powerful. And the way that you build this is, like, just incredibly powerful. Like, and it's a different kind of obnoxious. It is, again, like repeat edict effects that are forced based on your creatures dying. Again, like a Dictate of Erebos type effect, essentially. If you get a Dictate of Erebos out, you have a sacrifice outlet, your opponents are they're done. They can't keep any creature in play, like ever again, because you sacrifice an insect. They each have to sacrifice 1 creature each, so 3 creatures being sacrificed. As long as those are non-token, which typically they are, you'll be getting 3 more insects. So you sacrifice another one. They have to sacrifice. You're basically just forcing sacrifice all their creatures, and then you have a giant army yourself. So, like, and again, it is one that you definitely don't have to build tribal at all. Like it mentions like, insect, leech, slug, worm, cool. Like you don't have to do that at all. You really don't have to focus on that at all. It is nice that your insects drain when you attack, and there's some ways to take advantage of that. Again, like, okay, when I gain life, I get this. When they lose life, I get this. That kind of stuff as well. But yeah, overall, it's just like, it's a bit too powerful, and I know I wouldn't hold myself back from building it. Like, I would include the cards that are powerful with it too, and I know that might not lead to the right play experience for my play group, or typically, the types of play that people I play with want to play with. So I think that this one is although it is an interesting design, it's a will never build for me, because like I can't see myself putting someone through that where I'm just like, and I've played like that in the past where I just kind of completely hold down the board and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I've got I can't remember what the vampire is that costs 7 that's budget friendly. What is that one that's basically dictated rebel? Someone in the comments will let me know what that name is. I can never remember that name. But yeah, like that effect in play of a Saraseer in play, and it's like, all right, yeah, you just can't play any creatures ever again because I'm going to wipe them out, make a bunch of insects, so deal with my board until you can do that. All right, next up, Elenda, Saint of Dusk, a 4/4 Vampire Knight, lifelink hexproof from instance, 4 mana in Orzhov. As long as your life total is greater than your starting life total, +1 in Menace, gets initial +5/+5, as long as your life total is at least 10 greater than your starting life total. So this is an interesting one. It's kind of like life gain slash like Voltron-ish commander, which is an interesting direction for a Voltron commander, and I do like that they're trying something different. Yeah, I mean, it is one where it does have my attention. It is probably like a might build. It's not one that I'm like just really running out there to go do. Like I started off with Voltron. Like Voltron in Commander, like I started with Rishkar, and then I went into like Voltron, like Shram and that kind of stuff as well. So I definitely like had my Voltron decks back in the day. Like technically my first deck on this channel, Nezahal, was Voltron as well, and I love that deck. I actually just remade it a little while ago. But yes, like Voltron to me, like I don't have too much Voltron in my collection, but this is an interesting one to go about because like you have to kind of like maintain that life total. You've got to manage that life total. Your opponents have to try to manage you not having that life total, because this can hit really hard. Again, literally it is very easy, very possible for you to get to that 10 greater life total, that 50 life by the time you get your commander out, and all of a sudden you've got a 10/10 lifelink hexproof from instance, which is good from a lot of removal, the majority of removal when it comes to like target removal and commander. And also Menace, like, cool. I'm just going to start swinging, hitting hard. And, of course, I've got double strike effects as well. And just like little pump on this commander, like +1/+1 Anthem will get it to a one-shot KO with double strike. So it's a might build. Because, again, it's like a Voltron that goes about in a different way. And I like when they iterate on those kind of things. Like, you know what? We've done Voltron before. This is a different direction for it. So I do like that. And it's kind of like a Blood Baron of Vizkopa vibes. That's cool. All right, next up. Dionysus, Elvish Archdruid, a 3/3 Elf Druid. Elves you control have whenever this creature comes tapped during your turn. Untap, put a counter on it. This ability triggers only once each turn. Some of my least favorite text in Magic is this ability triggers only once each turn, and also activate only as a sorcery. Those are two of my least favorite texts in Magic. Just is what it is. So that already just kind of hampers the card, makes me not want to build around all that much. And then I'm a Johnny at heart. So not a Johnny the Planeswalker, but a Johnny as in a player who likes to build the Rube Goldberg machine, essentially. But this one is, again, like elves, that is very incredibly supported against a tribe that has a lot of creatures for it, and also a lot of tribal support specifically for it. So it's kind of on rails with that. Is a different take on it, but again, the limitation, like, it's just one that I can never see myself building. So we're going to go with a will never build for this. Next up, Cynet Jelly Drover, a 2/2 human wizard for 4 mana in blue. Enters or dies, create a 1/1 blue jellyfish creature struggling with flying. Creature control with flying at +1/+1. This is at least like pretty broad for like, it's not tribal necessarily, but it's like flyers. I mean, it is still like a on rails-ish, but there's a lot of room for that with a lot of different kinds of flyers out there. And again, there's only so many like, yeah, flyers get +1/+1, or, flyers get this, or when a flyer enters, you get this. Like, there's only so many like, yeah, you should probably run that in the deck. You've got a lot of different directions you can go with it. Blink effects as well. I'd put this one probably more on like a likely won't build. Like, I'm not, running to go build this one, but it's one that's like one I could at some point. I haven't gotten any. There are some, I promise there are some that are like the want to build. We will get there. It's just not yet. Okay, next up. Satina, Speaker of the Tajaru. A 2/2 Elf Scout for 3 mana in blue. When it enters, search life for a basic land card from the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. When it attacks, you may return a land card you control back to its owner's hand. When you do, put a counter target creature. This is another one where it's like, it reminds me of, I guess the other, like, green uncommon, the Centaur. I can't remember the name. I'm sorry. But a Ferris band, something like that. Basically, it is just like, okay, like it does stuff, but like it's not like a build around does stuff. Like, okay, cool. Like it enters the battlefield. It's basically a Farhaven elf in your command zone. Like, okay, I get a land. Cool. Yeah, I also have to attack. I can just bounce land back to my hand and get a counter. Okay, like, how do I build around? Like, there are certain build paths I'm sure you could do. There's certain lands that you want to get back to your hand that you can replay, but, like, it's just not all that enticing for me, so I'm going to throw this one in the will never build tier as well. Next up, let's move on to Shroofus Sproutsire, a 1/1 sapling with trample for 3 mana in green. Whenever a sapling you control deals combat to a player, create that many 1/1 green sapling creature tokens. So, first of all, I love that saplings finally have an actual creature. I did not realize this when the commander got spoiled, actually. This is the very first sapling, and people out there do not comment changelings. Like, come on, in the comments below. But this is the very first actual sapling in Magic that isn't a token. Like, this is the very first sapling of all time. And it's really cool. And it's actually a really cool design, because I think at first I didn't realize that, like, oh yeah, it's like whenever any sapling, not just this, hits, and also it depends on the amount it hits too. So yeah, make this thing hit a lot, make a bunch of saplings, probably some Anthem effects in play, and swing. It's straightforward but interesting in a way where you can do a lot of different really cool things with it. Again, like an Anthem, a very simple like guy's Anthem. Like, let's say you hit with 10 damage worth of saplings. Okay, you make 10 saplings, and then you have them come into play. They each get ++1 from the Anthem that you already have. And now those ones that you just made are going to be hitting for 20. So basically, it's, again, just exponential growth. A lot of cool things you can do with this one. Yeah, I'd say this one it's very powerful as well. Like, it isn't to, like, the power level, though, of, like, a Niv Mizzet, in my opinion, where it's like, oh, God, no. Or, like, Fumulus. But it's powerful, but it is manageable for your opponents. Yeah, I'd say this one it's an interesting one that I definitely might build at some point. It's really cool. All right, next up. Samila? Militian Poet. There we go. A 1/1 human bard for 3 mana in white. Whenever you cast your first enchantment spell, each turn, create a 2/2 white nymph enchantment creature token. At the beginning of each combat, if you control 5 more enchantments, gets +4 and lifelink until end of turn. This is one where it's like, I mean, the designs, okay, there have been worse designs for uncommon commanders out there. There definitely have been. Like, and there's some that are pretty cool from this as well. Some of them just don't speak to me as much. Let's just say that. This is one where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, casting enchantment spell on each turn, but that's typically, unless they have flash, like on my turn, I just get a 2/2 enchantment creature. Enchantment creatures are easier to deal with. It was like making just like enchantment tokens of some sort that weren't creatures, then I wouldn't have to worry about wraths. And again, the payoff for this is like, it gets slightly larger. This is a will never build for me. Maybe I'm just being a bit too, I mean, maybe I'm just in a mood right now. I'd be like, yeah, no, not about that. I'm just saying, like, will never build to a lot of things, but yeah, you know what? That's just how I'm feeling right now. All right, Plague on Lord of the Beach. Here we go. Okay, so this is one that has grown over me, like, basically with every day I see it. A 0/3 Starfish Wizard for 3 mana in blue. And just draw a card for each creature control with toughness greater than its power. Pay an Azorius mana. Target creature control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. So this is one where it has a lot of draw potential. Like, not like Niv Mizzet levels of draw potential, but like once you're set up, you can draw a ton from it and do some really spicy things with it. That being said, like, unlike Niv, like, you have to actually like put things on the board and dedicate yourself to actually like going out there to draw the cards. Niv is like more so like, oh, I played Niv. I played a 1 mana damage spell. I drew 9. Like, you're just drawing because the commander's in play, versus this is like you need to actually build up ahead of time, then you can draw. So, and this is one that like gives you, again, it's like tribal adjacent, where it's like, okay, toughness creatures, like greater than power. That's a, like, it's a broad spectrum of like what creatures you can utilize. Again, like, you could utilize defenders, but obviously then you need other ways to make the defenders be able to attack if you want to do that. But like, there's a lot of creatures out there that have a, just even like a 1 toughness buff over their power, and that makes a huge difference for this. And of course, you've got access to all the best blink effects in these 2 colors. It's basically a giant draw engine for you in an interesting way. So like, yeah, I do think that, and again, you have to commit to it. You have to like get those creatures on the board, and then you have to find ways to win with those creatures, which is kind of cool. So I think it gives you some cool avenues. It's one that has been growing on me, and it's one that I am pretty happy to say now is a want to build for me. This is one that I do want up there. Okay, next up. Okay, next up, actually. Okay, so we got 2 in a row now. All right, not to spoil it, but I just did. Ozox, the Clattering King. This is one that I do want to build around as well. So this is a very interesting commander. Again, like I said, like some of the uncommon commanders in this are like, not for me. And some are like, yeah, you're pretty sweet. All right, 3/2 Skeleton Noble for 3 mana in black. Can't block. Cool, who cares? When it dies, create Jumble Bones, a legendary 2/1 black skeleton creature token with this creature can't block, and when this creature leaves the battlefield, turn target card named Ozok's the Clattering King from your graveyard to your hand. This is a really interesting one where it's a commander that can, like, bring itself back. Like, it is a commander that can keep bringing itself back again and again and again. Like, right when you get this into play, if you are doing things in a proper way, or if your opponents aren't really on top of their game with, like, graveyard removal stuff, like, you can just literally never pay commander tax on this ever again, because it's keep coming back to your hand again and again and again and again and again. And there's some really cool things that you can do with that. It is basically like a double creature fodder out of your command zone, which is quite cool. And again, in mono black, so I like that kind of limitedness with this one. Yeah, there's some combo things that you can do with it, but I don't have access to that in my budget. I do not have Phyrexian Altar. I do not have Ashnod's Altar, so I will not be comboing with it in that way. Not that there aren't other ways that you could do it, but I do think this is a very cool one where, again, it's like not infinite creature fodder, but it's an absurd amount of creature fodder from your hand, essentially. You can keep getting again and again and again and again and do some really cool things with it. So yeah, we've seen like aristocrat style commanders from a lot of different aspects. One that give you benefits when creatures die, one that are a great sacrifice engine. You don't see as many, I feel like, that are like, oh, that's just great fodder. Like, this is just a great fodder commander where you're like, yeah, I'd like you to die again and again and again. The fact that you can't block does not matter. I will have a sacrifice outlet in play, and I'll do some pretty cool things with this. So I do like that kind of different approach to this one. So this one, to me, again, is a want to build. I do think it's pretty cool. Okay, next up. Nirdiv, Devious Diver, a 2/2 Merfolk Rogue for 3 mana in blue. When it becomes tapped, target player mills cards equal to its power. Whenever you cast a spell from your graveyard, activate an ability card from your graveyard, draw a card, put a counter on it. This is an interesting one. It is one that, again, is like one of those I'd probably put right in the middle, like if I had that category, but I like that I didn't give myself that category. I kind of have to choose up or down. It's one where, like, okay, do I think that there's enough interesting elements of cards in your graveyard that are like, okay, activating abilities or casting out of your graveyard? Like, do I have enough resources? Am I not just like chucking every single flashback card I can find? Do I have other things I can do with that? I am in a mono color, so it is a little limited, but there's like that. It's interesting in that you can, like, okay, obviously you can grow its power through doing the actual thing where you're playing things out of your graveyard and stuff and activating out of your graveyard. But obviously, if you just throw a Blackblade Reforged on this, that's going to help. So being able to pump this in other ways, find ways to tap it outside of attacking, find ways to tap and untap it. There's plenty of ways to do so in blue. So you can just tap and mill yourself like a lot. Like, that's what I'd be doing, milling myself a ton, getting myself access to like basically a second hand with the cards I can play out of my graveyard or activate in my graveyard, and then draw a bunch of cards with this. It is interesting. It's probably right on the cusp of like a might build. It's probably on the cusp of a might build. There's enough interest there where I think like, oh, there we go. It's enough interest there where I think like, yeah, you know what? I think there's some interesting aspects to this one. Next up, Loot Exuberant Explorer, a 1/4 Beast Noble for 3 mana in green. You may pledge to land each of your turns, pay 6 mana in total, tap like the top 6 cards of your library. May have a creature card mana value less than or equal to the number of lands you control from among them. Put on the battlefield with the rest of your library in random order. This is a green commander that does green things. I have done green decks before that are like, like, hey, big creatures, or hey, lands. Like, I have done that before. I've been there, done that. It's not something that, like, I'm not completely against this commander. Like, I'm not completely against building around a commander like this at all. There's definitely some interesting aspects that you can do with this. There's some ways to, like, okay, like, I get this creature on the top of my library with this other card that I set myself up with. I have an untap effect, so I can, activate this twice a turn. And yeah, I'm in green, so I can do that with 12 mana. That's no big deal at all. Yeah, there's some cool things you can do with it. And again, it's one of those commanders where, like, when it first came out, like, I kept reading, obviously. And then I was like, oh, wait, Wizard didn't put activate only as a sorcery on this card? I thought they would, but they didn't. So yeah, you can utilize, it's kind of weird where they pick and choose to be like, we don't want you to be able to do a combat trick with that. And then like, this one's like, you can do a combat trick with that. It's like, okay, well, why don't you just be consistent with your things and just allow people to do combat tricks with things? I don't know. Anyways, yeah, I'm going to put this one with the likely won't build because I've kind of been there, done that before. It's a pretty powerful commander. It's cool, but like, it's not one that's completely for me. All right, Kiora the Rising Tide. 3/2 Merfolk Noble for 3 mana in blue. Enters, draw 2, discard 2. Threshold, whenever it attacks, if there are 7 more cards in your graveyard, may create Scion of the Deep, a legendary 8/8 blue octopus creature token. So a cool thing that you can do with this one is like Mirror Box. You can be like, okay, cool, yeah. I mean, typically I'd only be able to keep one of those legendary octopuses around, but all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? Let's create a lot more with Mirror Box, which breaks the legendary rule for you. This is one where I would build, I mean, that'd be nice to have, obviously, with the 8/8s, but, like, I wouldn't count on that necessarily, and also you have to send your commander into danger, but obviously on that attack, you could just blink your commander to be like, okay, I attack. I blink my commander because I don't want it to die. But yeah, using and abusing the ETB to loot a ton could be really cool. Having ways to benefit from discard as well as draw could be really cool as well. And obviously, like, once you get, like, I'm not going to say a better, ETB in play, but, like, yeah, there are certain ETBs out there like, oh yeah, just straight up draw 2, or straight up draw 3 even. Essentially, you're not losing out on any of those cards. Obviously, though, if you have those discard synergies in play already, you might want to consider still blinking this one. But basically, yeah, like, cool ETB, blink, like, gain benefits from drawing, discarding. Like, yeah, it's interesting enough. I do think that it's like a might build for me. And again, I do like a lot of these, like, are monocolor, which I think is an interesting, like, challenge sometimes. Next up, though, Hurska Sweet Tooth, a 3/3 bear for 3 mana. In green, but it's actually in Selesnya. When it attacks, create a food token. Whenever you gain life, you may pay a Selesnya. When you do, target creature gets +X/+X until after X the amount of life you gained. I kind of wish it said gain this turn. I kind of do, but so you can kind of stack it, but I understand that it doesn't. I do think this one's pretty interesting. So again, this is one where it's like, I mean, this is just, I'm going to put it there right now. This is one that is a want to build for me. Like, this is like, it's an interesting enough design. It's one where there are interesting aspects to it. Like, I think that some players might underestimate just like how easy it is to gain an absurd amount of life, like, very quickly. So being able to, yeah, like, cast like a life doubling effect. And again, you're in green, you've got ways to ramp where you can cast a lot of things very quickly. Like a life doubling effect or like a congregate effect where it's like, okay, I gain 2 life for every single creature on the board. I'm playing commander, that's going to be a ton. You can gain enough to either make this into a one-shot KO if you've got ways to get it through, but I also would build, like, again, a flying men type strategy, which you have access to a lot of evasive low-to-the-ground creatures, especially in white. So yeah, get a lot of low-to-the-ground creatures out, swing, some of them are going to get through, and the ones that get through, I mean, one that get through, you just pump it a ton. You also have other cards that can, like, gain you life based on a creature's power and toughness. So, like, you literally just like, okay, pump 1, gain off of that 2, pump another one, and, like, do a lot of crazy things with that. I mean, like, yeah, you can give one, if you've got a creature that has first strike and it has life and it has, like, lifelink, you're like, okay, like, that thing hit for a lot of power, it hit first, cool, I just gain life, I can pump another one that's going to be hitting as well. You can do some really cool kind of, like, just little interactions with this that I think are really awesome. And again, being able to, yeah, just, pump for 3 with a food token could be nice too. So there you go. But yeah, being able to pump a lot, I think it could be it's a really cool, interesting design, I think. Like, life gain / combat tricks. Like, again, I like these little iterations on things. Like, we've seen combat tricks before. We've seen life gain before. Thank you for taking us in a somewhat different direction. Next up, Gornog, the Red Reaper, a 2/3 Minotaur Warrior with haste that costs 3 mana in red. Cowards can't block warriors. Whenever one or more warriors you control attack a player, target creature the player controls becomes a coward. Attacking warriors you control get +X/+0, where X the number of cowards your opponents control. I mean, this is like kind of, hey, one of each your opponent's creatures can't block, and also your creatures get pumped +3/+0. Kind of like melee-ish in a way. It is interesting. It's interesting, but, like, again, it's like, okay, I need to get warriors in play to do that, so I'm not completely on rails when it comes to, like, okay, I need all the warriors. It's not, it is a supported but not supported tribe as well. Yeah, this one thing just keeps coming in my head with this one. It's like there are certain cards, I think is it 1 or 2 cards out there? Maybe just 1 card. I think it's in white. But, like, it makes all your opponent's creatures into changelings. So being able to be like, oh, by the way, now you have a massive army of cowards, and now all your cowards pump my creatures a ton. So, like, just because of that, but it keeps going ahead like, oh, I wish that was there. I wish that was there. So it's unfair for me just to be like, well, just because you don't have this one card that I want access to, I'm going to bump you down. But, like, it's one that's probably likely won't build for me. It's not in the might builds. It's a likely. Okay, next up. General Crete, the Boltbringer, a 2/2 Goblin Soldier for 3 mana in red. Whenever one or more goblins you control attack, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. Whenever creature you control enters, 1 damage each opponent. It's kind of like a mini Perforos in a way. Like, it is like an Impact Tremors on a commander, basically. So there you go. And it's also like you could go Goblin Tribal if you want to with this one, but you definitely don't have to. Like, you can just attack with another goblin, you can just, once you like attack with this the first time, make that one goblin, you can just keep using the next goblin to attack. Or I guess they're tapped at attacking, but you need ways to get them through, I guess, too. Okay, so I guess you probably would benefit a bit more from Goblin Tribal, obviously. Or at least, again, there are a good amount of like, okay, yeah, oh gosh, what dragons? What's the one with the make 2 goblins? Anyways, there's a lot of like 2 mana make 2 goblins. There's a lot of 3 mana make 3 goblins. Like there's a lot of ways to make a lot of goblin tokens. Obviously, you don't have to necessarily just go completely into just goblins. Make a lot of other tokens in a lot of different ways. It's one that's like okay, but it doesn't speak to me all that much. So I'm gonna go with this one. They likely won't build. So there you go, General Creek. All right, next up, we've got Evereth, Viceroy of Plunder, a 2/2 vampire soldier with flying for 3 mana in red. Rakdos commander, sacrifice a creature or artifact, put a counter on Evereth, Viceroy of Plunder. If the sacrifice permanent is a treasure, it gains lifelink until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. When Evereth dies, you may pay 1 in Rakdos. When you do, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. Yeah, I mean, it's unfair. It is unfair, and I understand that completely, but when it comes to, like, a commander that, like, would be really exciting for me if it didn't have that text on it, I immediately bump it down. Like, this is one where if it didn't have the text on it, activate as a sorcery, this might have been, like, a might build, because, like, I do think it's a cool design. I think it's a cool design to be able to sacrifice creatures. I just don't know why, like, you need to limit it in that way where it's like, okay, that would just be really problematic if you could sacrifice things at sorcery speed. But, by the way, loot can activate at instant speed to just cheat creatures off the top of your library into play. Like, why does this need to be sorcery speed? So, this one's like a will never build just because, like, I probably couldn't get that out of my mind when I'm building it. Like, there'd be a situation where I literally, like, have this in an opponent's turn and I've got a decent army and I'm like, okay, next turn's the turn. I'm not telling people this, but like, next turn's the turn where I'm going to be sacrificing my army, making this massive, and then I'll sacrifice this or something else and I'll hit them all for a lot. And then my opponents are like, okay, I wrath the board, and I'm like, I can't do that because I hit sorcery speed. Like, why? Why? So because of that, it is a will never build for me. Again, like, I understand the way that Wizard says, like, you know, like, well, it makes you like have to think more about building around that kind of stuff. Sure, but it also just kind of limits the application of the card, and like, you don't need to limit certain things. Like, this would not be broken if it didn't have that. I think the only like bar for me when it comes to like the design of these cards, like, would this break it? No? Okay, then it's fine not to have that text on. Like, don't put activated sorcery on this one. Like, no reason. Okay. Off my soapbox for now. Next up, Cleon Mary Champion, a 2/2 human soldier with double strike for 3 mana in red. Whenever you cast a spell that targets it, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card until the end of your next turn. This is like a One Punch Man commander, and I like One Punch Man. The anime, and as well as the commander. Can't remember the name in Jeskai. What's the One Punch Man name in Commander? Okay, anyone, someone let me know. Anyways, this is an interesting one where it's like, okay, you are going all in a way, but you also can like make up for that in a way. Like, again, you are, okay, cast spells that target this, pump this, get that double strike, and get this through, and have it just hit for an absurd amount to take out players in one shot. Again, in one punch. Cool. Do that. I mean, it's not that hard to get to. Like, again, there's some +3/+0 cards out there. There's double power cards out there. And then also the double strike you're going to get there if you get to 11 quite quickly. This one, though, again, like, usually that kind of a strategy, like, okay, I'm out, I've got no hand. Uh-oh. This is like, all right, you know what? No, you do get a temporary hand for next turn. Like, cards later next turn. So if you just keep casting the target this, you get that impulse draw until the end of your next turn. So hopefully you hit some things that can help with this, or at least wheel so that you can, like, reset. But yeah, it's a pretty cool design. I like this, like, all in, but also, like, hedge my bets a little bit by giving you some impulse draw kind of a card. So let's go with a might build tier. Next up, Arabo, the First Fang, a 2/2 cat avatar for 3 mana in white. Other cats you control get ++1. Whenever it or other cat you control enters, create a 1/1 white cat creature token. This is one, again, I'm very sorry out there, tribal fans out there. It's just not my type of deck typically. Typically, I do say, again, I did put Slinza in the likely won't build tier, okay? This is one where, again, cats maybe a couple years ago, like, weren't very supported. They really weren't. And now they start getting more and more support. They are pretty supported now. Where, again, it is just kind of on rails on what ones you might want to include. What, you know, like, okay, all cats get this. Whenever cat does this, you get this. It is just kind of more so on rails, and that's just not how I like to build. Like, this is like, throw all those good tribal cat pieces in there, put some blink effects in there, especially mass blink effects, and you're good to go. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Put some other anthems in there too. But, like, I just feel like it is a bit on rails, and I don't that's just not my type of commander thing to build, so I'm not going to build it. Okay, there we go. Moving on. Inept Vizier of Hazaret, a 4/2 Jack Warrior Trample for 3 mana in red. You may exert it as it attacks when you exile the top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn and play those cards. This might be the worst design out of every, not the worst design, but like worst design for a commander. Like I know that things, not everything, okay. I know that not every single card, every single legendary creature is designed as a commander or for a commander. I understand that. But when evaluating these things on the same playing field, that's how I have to do it. And I have to say, you know what? As a commander, this is one that I don't know. This might be like one of those commanders that gets like 3 builds on EDH Rec. I could be very wrong on that, but it might just get 3 builds on EDH Rec. It is one that's like I will never build because it's like a, why is this a thing? Like, okay, I've got my commander say 4/2 a trample, and then, all right, I have to attack. I have to say you're not untapping, and then I get Impulse Draw 2. Okay. That better been some really good cards off the top after sending my commander into danger, which it might have died, and if it didn't die, it's still limping around and isn't able to untap next turn as well. Okay. Next up, Alessia Who Laughs at Fate, a 2/2 Human Warrior first strike for 3 mana in Rakdos. Whenever it attacks, put a counter on it. Beginning of your end step, you attack this turn. Turn target creature with mana value less than or equal to Alessia's power from your graveyard to the battlefield. I like the variable amount that it takes to actually get things back out of your graveyard. I like that it doesn't have to be Alessia who is actually attacking. It can be another creature who's attacking. And I do like that you're getting like those counters though when you do attack, which is quite nice. Obviously, if you throw Death Touch on this, that's very nice as well. Makes it incredibly hard to block, if not impossible to block for your opponents to actually take it out. I think overall it's interesting. It's not quite to that, like I really want to build tier. It's like a might build. Like, you know, there's some pretty cool things that you can do with it. So I'm gonna go with a might build tier, like reanimation / power / some like combat kind of fun stuff. Cool. All right, next up, Zul'Ashur Ashur Lich Lord, a 2/2 zombie warlock for 2 mana in black. Ward, pay 2 life. Tap, you may cast target zombie creature card from your graveyard this turn. Okay, so again, zombies is one of the most supported tribes out there of all time. It's like right up there with like elves and dragons and whatnot. At least it's an interesting like take on a zombie commander. Like in my opinion, like it goes about in a different way, right? Okay, you get access to your graveyard on tap. There are ways to untap, not that many in this in mono black. Maybe I'm just trying to sell it to myself and be like, no, it's a likely won't build, but it's like, no, it's a tribal commander, so it's like one where it's like I mean, there's an absurd amount of like, yeah, you need to include that in a zombie deck card. So I'm probably just gonna throw this one and they will never build it because I gotta be honest with myself, I'm just probably never gonna build it. Okay, next up, Erdan, Dromoka Warrior, a 1/1 human warrior for 2 mana in white. Whenever it enters, put a counter target creature. Whenever you attack creature with a counter on it, gains first strike until end of turn. If it has 2 or more counters on it, gains double strike until end of turn instead. Yeah. Just gonna be real with this one right now. Okay, yep, we'll never build. Sorry, Erdnan. Yeah, it's kind of another one of those like uncommon commanders. Just like, all right, why'd you make this? Yeah, it's just yeah, okay, go Voltron, go counters, and sure you could pump another creature, but you're probably just gonna pump this one, give a double strike, and there's no like interesting avenue to this one where again like. Cleon, was that the name of the other one? Was like, yeah, you know what? If you target me, cool. I'll give you a temporary card draw or card advantage, you know, with some impulse draw. And that might work out. It might not. This one's like, no, like, okay, cool. Pump me and then attack. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, there's no like really interesting angle for me for this, except for like, okay, cool. I got 2 counters on it. Okay, that was the angle. All right, next up, Tiny Bones Bauble Burglar, a 1/3 skeleton rogue for 2 mana in black. Whenever an opponent discards a card, exile from their graveyard, they stash counter on it. During your turn, you may play cards you don't own with stash counters on them from exile. A mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells. 4 mana until tap. Each one discards a card, active in sorcery. This, I think, is an interesting design. I definitely think it's an interesting design. It's just one that I will never build myself. Because I will never personally build it and like play it because my playgroup and LGSs that I play at, like typically from my experience, like don't really want to just be top decking all the time. And if you are building around Tiny Bones, your goal is to just make everyone else be top decking all the time. Because basically whenever they discard a card, that is card advantage for you. So you have there's no incentive not to force your opponents to discard their entire hands, essentially. So yeah, you're just going to be like, okay, discard card, discard cards, discard cards, discard cards, repeat discard effects. Your opponents have no cards in hand. Maybe you don't have any cards in hand, but it doesn't matter because you have their cards that are stashed. And basically, they're all just top decking and hoping they can stop you. And it's just a play experience that is fine for some groups out there, just not fine for the groups that I typically play with. So it is one that I will never build. Ivora, Insatiable Air, a 1/1 Vampire Warrior, trample for 2 mana in red. Whenever it enters, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, create a blood token. Okay, whenever you discard a card, put a counter on it. I mean, there are some more interesting angles than some of the ones in the will never build, I would say. Like, it is close to that, but like, yeah, you could do some wheel effects where you can draw a bunch of cards, discard a bunch of cards though, more so with this one, get a bunch of counters on it. You could have like free discard effects in play. Oh man, what's the 3 mana enchantment that you can discard? Seismic Assault, discard lands, ping things. So you can do some like tricky things with that as well to like pump it. So it is one where it's like, yeah, it's not quite a will never build. Maybe there's like an angle that I'm not thinking of that eventually I will. So it's like, at least there's a different direction for this. So yeah, I'm gonna go with a likely won't build. Okay, next up, Brigoni, Soldier of Meltus, not sure to say that. 2/2, Human Soldier with Vigilance for 2 mana in white. Whenever you cast a spell that targets it, put a counter on it, tap, remove a counter from it, draw a card. I mean, it's a draw engine in mono white, which you typically don't have that as commanders, but is in a interesting-ish way. It is one that doesn't speak to me all that much, though. Like, it's just like, okay, like, you tap, draw a card. All right, I probably have ways to untap it. I probably have ways to get more counters on it. I just use this just basically as a draw engine, and I don't really care too much about the heroic part of it, really. Like, sure, I'll have cards that are like, okay, it gets indestructible, time to protect it, and that, you know, gave me the counter on it, but I probably have other ways to get counters on it more easily and more efficiently throughout the game, so I'm not, like, dependent upon casting targeted spells on it to do so. Yeah, it's just okay, I think. It's just, like, it's a draw engine that doesn't really speak to me all that much, so it's likely won't build. Okay. Next up. Felia, Viper Whisperer, a 1/3 Gorgon Assassin with Death Touch for 2 mana in Golgari. Whenever it attacks, you may pay 1 in Golgari. If you do, create a 1/1 Black Snake creature token with Death Touch for 5 mana until end of turn. Whenever one or more Gorgons or snakes you control deal combat to a player, that player loses half their life rounded up. It's interesting. I mean, being able to like force opponents to lose half their life rounded up could be a pretty cool thing. It is one where it's like, okay, Gorgons are not all that supported, and neither are snakes really all that much. Like a little bit, I guess. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, making someone lose half their life is pretty spicy. I'm glad that costs a decent amount to actually activate. Yeah, it's again one of those, it's probably like, if there was a middle tier, I'd throw it in the middle tier, but I gotta force myself one way or the other, so I think I'm gonna put this one in the might build. Because, yeah, like the losing half-life, you can do some pretty fun things with that as well. Like, okay, yeah, you double up that life loss with like a wound reflection or whatever. Yeah, you can do some pretty interesting things. Yeah, I'm gonna throw that one right there for now. Okay, all right. Kellen, Planar, Trailblazer, a 2/1 Human Fairy Scout for a single red mana. Pay 2 mana basically, becomes a Human Fairy Detective, gains, deals combat to a player, exile top card of your library, you may play a card this turn. 3 mana essentially, it comes if it's a detective, becomes a 3/2 Human Fairy Rogue, gains double strike. It is like a Build-A-Bear commander. And that, like, I do like Build-A-Bear commander designs. This one, like, I feel like, again, I kind of talked about this with one of the other commanders earlier, where, like, every day I see it, like, it grew on me. Every day I see this one, it grows less on me. Like, it's like, maybe not. So, like, again, like, the payoff for paying all this mana into it, 6 mana in total, is, and there are ways to, like, mitigate that mana, right? You could do, like, Power Stones or whatnot. You got ways to mitigate that mana throughout the game. Like, okay, like, I paid all this mana to have a 3/2 double strike that, like, gets me 2 cards off the top. Cool, that's good. That's good. But, like, if it's dealt with, and you're like, okay, I got to start over again and do that again. And it's like, there's not like really interesting elements around this, except for like, okay, it can hit hard and it can give me impulse draw. Like, okay, like there's some build parts, but like not ones that appeal to me all that much. It's not like a definitely not ever build, but it is like a likely won't build. So I think overall, I feel pretty good about where I'm at on these. I mean, obviously, it's just, you know, my opinions on what I want to build, what I don't want to build, and that kind of stuff, and will never build. But yeah, I think this is feeling pretty good on where I'm at with most of these commanders. So yeah, let me know your comments in the comments. Let me know your comments in the comments below. There we go. What your thoughts on my picks are for what I want to build, might build, likely won't build, will never build. What your actual picks are. What are you most excited to build? Which ones won't you ever build? Where do you think I'm completely off base and be like, Mitch, Nib Mizzet can be so much more interesting than you are making it? Yeah, probably, but yeah, it's also very, very powerful. And so is Fumulus. If you play up against a Fumulus, look out, okay? Look out. That is a powerful commander. Do not underestimate that one. And with that, this episode is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. In the comments below, let me know your thoughts are on this episode. And of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.